candles. Gotta love them, don't you? Woohoo! No, I better not be a trick one. Paid a lot of money at IKEA for that. All 5 are lit. Thank you, Pastor Chris. What do you think the 5th one means?
Christmas.
And what's a part of the word Christmas? Everyone? Christ. This is the Christ candle. When we light this candle, it reminds us that Jesus is always with us wherever we are. As you wake up tomorrow, before we open all our presents, you could light a candle at home to remind us of Advent and all that we have learned over the last 4 weeks. Jesus is the light. There's actually a song. It's called This Little Light of Mine. I'm going to let it shine. And I'm not going to sing because I'm off key today, so apologies everyone. Let us remember that tomorrow is for Jesus. With the help of peace, hope, joy, love, comes Jesus. And that's what we're going to remember this Christmas. I've actually got a Christ candle for you to take home. Yeah, and there are spares for some of the adults if you'd like them, because I bought too many, as you do. So thank you for taking this journey with me on Advent. Have you enjoyed it? Yeah? Something a bit different.
Well, so I rang a friend of mine this week. He just got out of jail in Sale, and he's moved back to Seymour, where I used to work, and he's homeless. He's got nowhere to go. He can't go back to the place where he was before he went to jail, and he's got a car, so he's sleeping in his car. And the police came and knocked on the window of the car and said, what's going on? He goes, I'm sleeping here. And they're fairly sympathetic to that. There's a lot of homeless people in our world today. And they said, is there anything we can get you? And he said, you can get me a house. And they said, we can't give you that. And they said, take care. But he's got to move on every couple of nights because people complain about having a strange car in their street with someone sleeping in it. And he found it, anyway, that's his story. But it's a terrible thing to be homeless, a terrible thing to knock on the door and get no. He tried the caravan park and they said, no, we don't want people like you in this caravan park. And of course we have in the Christmas story, it says, she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room in the inn. And that's all it says. There's no mention of an innkeeper or and the scholars are debating what the word inn means there. It could mean a guest room and so on. But there's another story in Luke's Gospel which tells about an innkeeper. It's the story of the Good Samaritan. And when the Good Samaritan brings his wounded friend along to the inn of wherever that was, the innkeeper says, sure, bring him in, and welcomes him. So here's one innkeeper who says yes, and one innkeeper who said no room. And I just imagine, what if it was the same person, but he changed? What if he said no at first, but he learnt to say yes? And that's a wonderful thought. And so I thought I would give you my imaginative story, and I will do it as the innkeeper. I've been in the inn trade a long time. My father used to own this motel, and he gave me 2 rules to operate by. He said, first of all, do whatever the customer wants. Give the customers what they want. And, you know, we hospitality people have to learn that. But the second thing he said was, try and aim for a higher class of guest. You know, if you charge a little bit more, you get better quality people. You want to keep the riffraff out. You don't want those sort of people who, well, he had up on the wall, he had framed a check that had bounced, and he wrote under it, no checks, because they bounce. And so I'm very glad that I never followed his 2 rules, otherwise I wouldn't be where I was today. So just recently, for example, a Samaritan came into my inn. Now, I knew he was a Samaritan straight away. He had a donkey, and on it was this bloke who was just about naked, covered in wounds, and looking really beat up. And he hires a room and stays the night, and he wants me to, then he pays me some money, and he says, there could be more costs. You look after him, and I'll pay when I come back. That's credit. Now, there's 3 strikes against him. First of all, he's a Samaritan. We don't trust that type. And second, he's asking for credit. And third, he wants me to help this guy who looks pretty dodgy. He's got some story about being beaten up by robbers. But, you know, I say yes. And that's the sort of bloke I've become. Like I mentioned before, I didn't always follow my father's rules. This place sometimes looks like a refuge. It looks like more like a soup kitchen or a advice bureau than a high-class inn. Everything's changed. And I've begun to think about life differently, and I don't dream of making a pile anymore, just making a difference. Wasn't always that kind. It all changed on December 24, many years ago, when it was a really busy time. You know, what happened was a lot of people from the south around our area. That's a terrible noise. Is it my... How about I put that there? Would that help? Maybe not. A lot of people... Now it's stuck behind my apron. Soil was better up near around Galilee area, and they all got asked to go back to their hometown for a census, Caesar's orders. So they all come down back to Bethlehem, and the place is swarming. There's kind of like a tent city on the footy oval. There's no vacancy signs on all the inns. And then this couple comes and knocks on my door. And I look at her, and she's pregnant, and she's really tired. And I look at him, and he's really exhausted. And they say, please, you got a room? Well, my first instinct, father's method, no, go away. But something began to change in my heart. Compassion came from somewhere, and I turned to him and I said, look, I think I've got something for you. And I take him around the back. You know the story. There's a stable, and I take him in there, and there's a little feed trough full of hay, and they have the baby. I get out and let the wife do that part. Then I come back, and I see her lying there, and the baby, and something changed inside of me. And next thing you know, there's a knock on the door, and it's a snake, the drover, and he's come down with a few mates, and they said they saw some vision out on the hills, and this baby's something special, and he's the champion to follow. This kid's going to be something really wonderful. He's going to be the trailblazer, and when you want to see the world a better place, he'll be the example, the champion. So there'll be food for the hungry and jobs for the unemployed and houses for the old folks. It's going to be wonderful, says Snake. Well, it all sounded a bit left-wing, but anyway, we all gave 3 cheers. And next day, a traveller vacates his room, and so I get the couple, Mary and Joseph, and the baby, and I give them a room inside the hotel. And they're doing all right there. They were going to stay a couple of weeks just to recuperate, and then they were going to head back. And they didn't have much money to pay, but as it turned out, Joseph could do a bit of maintenance around the place. He was a tradie, apparently, qualified tradesman, and so it was working out all right. And I went down to the market after a couple of days, and there's all this buzz about these strangers that had turned up in town. These 3 guys who floated in on camels. They're asking around for information. Well, I hardly get home when there's a knock on the door. They turn up outside the inn, and there's troops of children clustering around them. They make the camels sit and majestically dismount. One of them's a black chap, one looks Persian or something, and the other one is strangely pale. They introduce themselves. I meet them at the door, and they ask me to show them where the king is born. Interesting, isn't it? If I'd stuck to my father's rules, none of these things would ever have happened. Well, they go into the room where the family are, and I didn't hear all that they said, but the rumour goes they brought these very expensive and exotic gifts. And as they're leaving, I'm holding the door open for them, and the black guy looks me in the eye for a moment, and then he says, "You too have worshipped the child king. May the great world maker bless you for your kindness and for opening your heart." And then the Persian chap stares at me as he's passing over the threshold, and he says, "Now that the child has opened your heart to kindness, do not let fear or weariness close it again." Well, this was nice. I like a few tips from the wise. But then the third guy, the pale one, who I heard later was a Saxon, he turns to me and he says, with words that chilled me to the bone, he says,
We met a king who was vain and vicious. We've been told in dreams that we must avoid his abode. But you, may you be strong and courageous, because there is a dark shadow winging its way towards you. And then they were gone. Well, that gave me something to puzzle over, I tell you. The next morning, Joseph comes racing out first thing in the morning, his hair tousled, his eyes wide and wild. "Good innkeeper," he says, "today we must depart. The Lord has told us we are to leave." Well, I helps them pack, and after a bit, I raises a delicate matter. There is a small matter of the rent. I'm prepared to make a generous discount and appreciate your maintenance work. He says, "Do not worry, good innkeeper." And he pulls out gold coins. Where did he get them from? I don't know. Well, off they went, down south, I think. And after lunch the next day, the wife and I just having a little postprandial nap, asleep in the afternoon, and suddenly we hear screaming in the streets. I goes downstairs and look outside, and there's a woman running past with a baby, and there's women and children running everywhere, and they're screaming. And I go to the woman and say, "What's the matter?" And she says, "It's the soldiers. They've come, they're killing the babies. The soldiers are killing the babies. They're going door to door and house to house." And he says, "Wait." I says, "Wait, I got somewhere. Come around the back." I take him around the back, and there's this kind of stable, and it's got hay in it. I say, "Hide in there." And she goes in there and she says, "This feels kind of safe. It's like a holy place." "Good," I says. I go out, there's someone else running past. I grab them, she said, "Go hide in the stable." And, well, it was a terrible time. It was just horrible. Soldiers came to my place. They searched the rooms. No children. They didn't think to look in the stable. After a terrible day and a half, they mounted their horses and rode off. The blackness had come that I'd been warned about. I'd opened my heart and kept my courage, and God had used me to save many lives. The boy's grown up now. I went up to Jerusalem last year for Passover, and everyone was talking about him. He does miracles. He's apparently a wonderful talker. He's got some disciples. I wouldn't mind being one. But he wouldn't want an old innkeeper like me, I'm sure. Funny though, I sort of feel like I'm one of his disciples, even though I only seen him as a baby. I feel that he taught me to live with an open heart and with kindness. And when it gets hard and difficult and seems to be given more than you get, I think back to that night, and I tells myself, remember the boy king and keep your heart open. And somehow it gets that bit easier. Anyhow, I've written my story in a song. I'll sing it to you. Somehow. I might just go to this mic. Turn that one off, maybe. You'll recognise the tune. Welcome, my friends, sit yourself down. Come meet the kindest landlord in town. Here in my inn, you'll feel at home, part of the family like old friends we've known. Sadly, I'll confide, I wasn't always kind. I used to run my inn very cut and dried. Master of the house, keeper of the bill, trying to make money, only earning ill will. Sneering at the poor, turn away the wrecks, keeping out the riffraff with their bouncing checks. Had a very high-class guest house. Looking back, it seems so strange. Now it seems a mystery. History shows that everything has changed. A fella came my way just the other day. He was a Samaritan, I see straight away. Now normally I'd balk, they're a shifty lot, especially when I see this beat up friend he's got. He pays me some then asks for credit, and will I help recuperate? That all sounds very chancy fancy, I oblige him like a mate. Master of the house, keeper of the inn, hospitality is what I specialise in. Never mind your race, or your dirty face. Bethlehem Hotel will offer you a place. Here you'll find an honest business. Here you get more than you spend. More than hotel master, pastor, helper, counsellor and friend. Sometimes I think I'm on the brink. Pour me a drink, 'cause I'll never thrive. So many folk desperately broke. If I don't help them, they won't survive. Arabs, Romans, Jews all stay. Some will pay some other way. I was quite mean but changed one December day. Many years ago, December 24, a fella and a lady knocking at my door. She was very tired, he was all done in. Knocked on every door but no rooms in the inn. That was during Caesar's census. Oh, the rooms were full that night. I had no spare places, gracious me. I said, I'll see you right. Now, I won't charge full price, 'cause I know this ain't the Ritz. I've got a little option that I hope just fits. I take him out the back, there's a little shack. Got a donkey's feed trough and an empty hessian sack. She begins to have the baby. I gets out and calls the wife. Soon the gentle lady's baby is a lying in the trough. Well, I'm master of the house, keeper of the inn. You should see the folks that started dropping in. Shepherds from the hills, wise men from the east, bringing gifts enough to make a king a feast. I twig that this baby's special, doesn't take a lot of nous. I fall on my knees and I make him the master of me house. A baby born to be a king, now he's changing everything. Life is so much better since I met a master for me house.